Il me semble que cet après-midi, le panel a déconstruit l'apparente colonialisation occidentale du concept de présent. Et on va continuer ce travail-là, mais on va attaquer cette question-là avec une méthodologie différente, d'un territoire différente et avec des interrogations différentes. Ravi Sundaram est le chef de, je vais traduire ce nom-là, c'est le chef de le centre pour l'étude de la société en développement. Ça fait ça? Je comprends? Society for the Study for Developing Society. Bon, oui, et ça c'est à Sarai, à Delhi, en Inde. Et Sarai, c'est un centre de recherche qui s'occupe des champs que nous avons trouvés déjà ici à la colonie très très importants, c'est-à-dire le champ d'urbanisme, le champ de médias et d'information. Ravi a publié plusieurs livres, comme par exemple, je vais lire ici, par exemple, Pirate Modernity, Media Urbanism in Delhi, et aussi No Limits, Media Studies from India. Oui, bon, vous voyez le titre de son talk là, c'est Vive le post-modernisme, post-postcolonialisme, je ne vois pas d'ici, et le contemporain a-t-il un nom? Pour ceux qui ne comprennent pas anglais, il y a des casques là-haut, là-bas, là, et parce qu'il va parler en anglais. Ok, et moi aussi maintenant. Okay, I apologize that we don't have Françoise Vergès here today. Unfortunately, her father had died, and so I'm here to introduce today. I'm sorry if there's a disappointment there. We've got a really wonderful speaker this afternoon. As I mentioned in French, it continues in many ways the engagement which we saw in the panel this afternoon. You know, there was engagement where it seemed to me there was a form of deconstruction of the Western colonialization of the concept of the present. And I think Ravi is going to touch on many of these questions and going to continue that and deepen that, but at the same time looking at that question from many different points of view. Okay, and also, of course, coming from a very different territory. Now, Ravi Sundaram is the director of the Centre, as I just said in French, for the Centre for the Study of...
Not CSDS.
All right. Oh, sorry.
My throat.
Oh, they have your throat. Well, he's the director of... sorry, Sarai, which is a research centre in Delhi. This is probably the first time in the world to show the sort of crazy connections we've got at this event. The first time ever in the world that a Glaswegian has introduced somebody from Delhi in Paris. Fantastic. What can you say, you know? Okay. You know, this centre, Sarai, they're really concerned with looking at studies in urbanism, in information, in media. Ravi himself is presently studying, his present research is into the post-digital age, and they're so much at the forefront of things that are happening in this idea of the contemporary. They are at the forefront of all the knowledge production in this field, which is really wonderful, considering the conversation we had this afternoon about that colonialization of the present by the West, because in no way is that going to be present in the talk to come. So as I also said, Ravi has published several books, and I'll just name a couple of them for you that you should look out for. They are, for example, Pirate Modernity, Media Urbanism in Delhi, and another book, No Limits, Media Studies from India. Okay, so, and these books, of course, have been translated into many different languages. English, of course, as you see, but many different languages in South Asia and beyond. So, really, we've got a person who's speaking at the forefront of the whole topic which we've been discussing today. So, I'd like you to give a big hand to welcome Ravi Sundaram. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. I want to thank Lionel for inviting me here, and I want to thank Kadar for his hospitality. And I think this space holds particular value for me for two reasons. One, because it's such a fantastic space. We know it, we love it. Two, it's the only place in Europe where I can speak Tamil, which is my mother tongue, outside. I don't speak French, but I speak Tamil. And Tamil is what is spoken in most of these neighborhoods. Those of you who live in Paris may know this. So that's why I'm particularly happy that in a way, I've come home. So what I'm going to go at today is talk about something very simple that all of us in this room are doing right now. We are invoking and participating in multiple orders of circulation of media, and I'm a scholar of digital media and urbanism, and I'm going to extract certain concepts and open up certain concepts that deal with the fraught notion of the post-colonial, and I'm going to do it through three levels. I'm going to talk firstly about what does circulation do? What does it attach itself to? What does it dislodge? And within this space, I'm going to talk of two disjunctions. The disjunction of sovereignty and secrecy, the disjunction of the public. So circulation, sovereignty and secrecy, and the public. Is there something called the public? And of course, is there something called the post-colonial at all? Okay? In an essay penned more than 30 years ago, while commenting on Ballard's novel Crash, Jonathan Crary, the art historian Jonathan Crary, declared that by the late 1960s, the legibility of the Western city appeared near the threshold of oblivion, unquote. So Crary says, beset by crisis, the Western city had become a product of networks and the excess of speed and circulation, bypassing all plans to give the urban a coherent shape. So for Crary says theory sought to impose a legibility on the city that was increasingly televisual. Remember, he's looking at Ballard's novel Crash, he's looking at Toronto, a completely bleak city, right? So actually, and Crary wrote this long ago, his insight has proved accurate. In the Western metropolitan centers, a significant allegory of urban crisis has been that of infrastructural decline. Infrastructural decline. The old modernist models of the productive industrial city have long gone. Their debris now litters the urban landscape as afterlives, ghostly afterlives. In this endless landscape of the post-urban spread, media corporations, globalized networks rule. So you have a vast hyperspace that has destroyed the capacity to reflect on capitalist modernity. Or as Frederick Jameson said long ago, he put it in his early critique of postmodernism, the ability to map it cognitively. So this is, at the same time that Crary was laying out this expressionist landscape of impending doom, which actually happened. Something else, a different dramaturgy was playing out in the post-colonial world, almost at odds with what Créé was saying. This is deeply depressing prognosis if you read that essay. So in the post-colonial world, state authority was steadily eroding either through economic crisis, neoliberal reforms, or war. And Africa is a very good example. But infrastructures went through a doubling role. They were constantly inverting. So an essay at that time, the same time Créé is writing, another essay by Achille Mbembe and Janet Reutemann intimates this churning. They're looking at Central Africa, and this is what they say, and I'll quote. Fraudulent identity cards, fake policemen dressed in official uniform, forged enrollment for exams, the illegal withdrawal of money orders, fake banknotes, the circulation and sale of falsified school reports, medical certificates, and damaged commodities. It is a manifestation of the fact that here things no longer exist without a parallel. Every law is submerged by an ensemble of techniques of avoidance, circumvention, and envelopment, which in the end will neutralize designation. There is hardly a reality without a double. So this is this doubling of infrastructures and this crisis of designation. A few years later, I'm taking you on an archaeology. A few years later, we moved down the line. Rem Koolhaas puts out his widely circulated essay, Learning from Lagos, as part of a Documenta 11 platform in the city devoted to African urbanism. So Koolhaas goes on to consider the status of Lagos, which is now a big art center. So at that time, Koolhaas's moment really begins it. Koolhaas goes on to consider what is the status of Lagos. Lagos, he says, has an aura of apocalyptic violence, a smoldering rubbish dump, unquote. So finally, Koolhaas takes a helicopter. He says, I have to see the city differently. He goes on a helicopter. And suddenly, in a flash, Koolhaas decides that Lagos, rather than bordering on chaos, was a series of functional correspondences and a dynamic confrontation of people and infrastructure. Suddenly, it's this kind of vitalism that he sees on the helicopter. Very paradoxical. So then he says, Lagos, there was an instant urbanism beyond the design and designation of post-colonial planning. Okay? So both the essays, Mbembe and Koolhaas, in wildly different ways. One person on a helicopter, other person on the ground. Wildly different ways. They shed something new happening in the South, outside the language of ruin and bloodshed and the narco-political discourse on Africa. That's all you hear, the narco-political discourse. What the comments did was they shed light on a dysfunctional but productive space of post-colonial infrastructure, where constantly moving networks bypass the language of the state and of sovereignty. In fact, for some time now, the problematic of circulation has posed new challenges for the idea of the contemporary. Here, circulation emerges as capable of producing very interesting disjunctions and a poetics, and I'm going to talk about both, the disjunction and the poetic. Rather than simply being an adjunct to neoliberal commodity economies and space-time compression. In the context of Asia, at least, circulation plays a very important role in the collusions and collisions of aesthetics and politics. It has disassembled the design and the name of post-colonial sovereignty and calls into question the very model of the public itself. So essentially, I'm looking at a new sensory infrastructure in the non-Western world and the potentialities and poisons it is thrown up. Yeah. What do I mean by sensory infrastructure? By the turn of the century, the last century, new media and low-cost infrastructures have begun to alter the relationship between power, cognition, and secrecy so central to the modern state. Nowhere is this more apparent than post-colonial regimes. So India, for example, has 1 billion mobile phone users, right? Some people have 2 phones. So clearly it's interesting. So the bulk of internet access comes through mobile phones. Initially designed as a communication device, the mobile phone, audio communication is so basic now. No one does that. It's become a multimedia machine whose possibilities are constantly expanding. E-commerce, everyday consumption, media circulation, political campaigns. Photography, which in the old days, in the post-colonial world, was largely accessed by the poor and lower middle classes in neighborhood photo studios and village fairs, is now today an everyday practice after the mobile phone, as are audio and video recording. It's a completely different space. Most people did not have cameras in the post-colonial world. Suddenly, in the past 5 years, they have cameras. And this pipes into network space. So networks invite us to share media relentlessly, ranging from the ludic to the disturbing. This ability to switch between formally discrete activities is central to the power of mobile media. Along with mundane voice communication, users can send messages, shop, share a funny, sacred, or explicit image among friends, mobilize for a demonstration, spend long, obsessive chat sessions with friends and lovers. Along with this, along with cultural and sexual articulations, we witness and are constantly invited to join a new form of personhood that flips between presentation and expression. So expression is performatively personalized, and I'm going to talk about that. So here is what is sensory infrastructure, where value is now increasingly drawn from experience. Now, this is by no means new. We've had photography, we've had cinema, we've had advertising. But I think since 2005, media infrastructure has shifted to the transformation of experience based on personalized media gadgets. Now, you can see the shift before our eyes. Even as mobile gadgets transform our own everyday lives, new knowledge, every day we hear about new knowledges. Data science, prediction systems, neuroscience, it's endless. Now, what is interesting is this. Few decades ago, all of this would have been Western monopolies. Today, it's only partially correct. At least I know it's partially correct. Many new technologies are being retailed and researched in India and China. Africa is one of the world pioneers in mobile money. Far before Apple Pay and all this new stuff happening in the West, Africa was one of the pioneers. In this sense, sensory infrastructure, as I shall show, has produced a significant challenge. It's a completely new infrastructure that has happened in the last 7 years. It's as if 100 years of media making has been compressed in the last 7 years in this personalized device, which is the phone, that is constantly inviting us to act. So this has intervened in a very significant way in post-colonial design, which I'm going to talk about today. So what do I mean by this? Post-colonial urban governance operated within a code that functionally separated the social and the medial. This is a code of governance. Welfare and governmental nurturing of a healthy population demarcated the domain of the social, very similar to Foucault's security lectures. The medial occupied the realm of leisure, to be serviced by infrastructural sites like newspapers, film studios, television networks, cinema theaters, radio stations. This is the world those of us who are older in the room grew up with. Welfare was the domain of the state and politics. Institutions of the media were dealt with by regulators and censors. So governmental power in the post-colony periodically filtered and differentiated between two orders of things, the two orders of circulation, people and things, and of public affect, where populations were kept away from the dangers of sensuous provocation. So you have the separation of people and things and public affect. so that excitable speech is carefully managed. So this management of public affect through authorized circulation has broken down in the post-colonial world, if not elsewhere, with the rise of media-enabled publics. What they do is they disrupt older transactions between sovereign power and a population seen susceptible to censorial powers. So you have the older police function of governance, post-colonial governance, which is to privilege select circuits of distribution and consumption through censorship. Now this is thrown wide open. Today, new forms of unauthorized publicity have actively destabilized the post-colonial regime and fed into new loops of circulation, blurring and confusing the old divisions between legal, non-legal, private, public, fact, artifact, governmental, non-governmental. The new interventions span homes, governmental offices, political parties, individuals, industrialists, everyone. New unregulated forms of media, audio, video, images, have begun spreading rapidly from a post-colonial population only seen as social political actors. Suddenly, you have these social political actors who would vote once in 5 times a year, performing and intervening every day. So this is a visceral, absolutely visceral media archive that has emerged from all walks of life. Political activists, transparency campaigners, jilted lovers, misogynists, torturers, ordinary citizens with camera-equipped phones. And Abu Ghraib is an allegory of the times we are living in. You have a military machine that implodes in 6 to 20,000 images. They just come out. It's absolutely incredible. Right? You have to imagine the impact of something like this. I once read an article of a Le Monde journalist who interviewed someone in Fallujah when the battle was going on. And he asked him, why did you come to Fallujah? He said, I came because I saw the image from Abu Ghraib. This intimated for me a time which is a mediatized time that has changed completely. It's completely changed, and we can never go back. So this circulation engine, imagine if it's happening all over the world. This circulation engine, I think, has significantly challenged the foundational premise of post-colonial design, which is indexed to the stable arrangement of people and things. Stable arrangement of people and things. So the key question became, what do you do when social political actors become media proliferators? They refuse to be classic social political actors anymore. So this is because media has become the infrastructural condition of life, rather than existing as distinct, regulated spaces like the cinema theater in the old celluloid era. So what you have today is a very interesting thing. Media objects move in and out of infrastructures, attach themselves to new platforms of political and aesthetic action, and depart and are drawn to spectacular time of events. So if you see this, this is what is happening. Objects, because they have life, they move in and out. They attach themselves to events, depart from events, and then they withdraw. Igor Kopytov, the anthropologist who worked on circulation, said commodities have lives that move in and out of circulation. Media objects are vital forms of that. And you had populations that really took off once video began. And you have these are two separate video forms which emerge from VHS. One is from Tunisia. The other is, this is a documentary on mill workers in central India, unemployed Muslim mill workers in central India who used VHS to produce a rip-off of Superman. So this is this new public sensorium where claim making is going to change completely, and the landscape changes completely. So I'm going to move on to the first disjunction, which is that of secrecy and sovereignty. So you have this new regime of circulation that is unleashed, and it produces disjunction number 1. In his book, Defacement, Michael Taussig suggests that secrecy, and I quote, is an invention that comes out of the public secret, unquote. Following Canetti, Elias Canetti, Taussig suggests that the public secret, and I quote, is that which is generally known but cannot be articulated, unquote. So the new loop of people and things, which I have talked about, involves the multiplying of networks, sharing practices, legal, paralegal circulation, and affect-driven political culture. So what you have is a complete overturning of the old model of sovereignty. Nationalist anti-colonial mobilizations had produced powerful affective settings through combinations of politics and culture, and Gandhi was a very important example of this. Post-colonial India was an equally charged universe. Cinema and media cultures presented dangers to post-colonial sovereignty. Disorders of subaltern crowds were seen as susceptible to film's sensuous, provocative pleasures. So the biggest problem after independence, after 1947, in India, was to regulate public passions in a media-saturated culture. Remember, India is one of the world's largest film-producing nations, not Hollywood. So the problem was, how do you regulate public passions? Because crowds are seen as excitable and dangerous, right? It becomes a huge problem in a media-saturated environment. William Mazzarella argues that censorship in India was constitutive of the performance of post-colonial sovereignty. So given the difficulties involved in instituting standardized mechanisms for the regulation of sensuous provocation, it is very difficult to standardize what sensuous provocation meant after widespread mediatization. So the police function of sovereignty is to manage the world of public affect. Basically, they looked at the emergent potential that arises between the sensuous resonances of mass-mediated images and the competing ways in which they are harnessed. So this is a gray zone. If you don't define what is to be censored, how do you manage sovereignty? It's a permanent performance of sovereignty. You say one day, this is fine, but that is not fine. It is done constantly through performance. So the sovereign performs his power on an everyday basis, right? So this is a very interesting gray zone between what Michael Warner calls the fruitful perversity of all media forms and their potential to overflow into unknown dangerous zones. So censorship, to abstract from this discussion, censorship's performative dispensation is to do two things. They are police and patron. So they have these two heads. They're police and patron. So on one day, the censor will say, oh, this is fine, no problem, go ahead. Another day, no, absolutely not. So this is I think, a chronic, this is a situation where censorship finds itself in a chronic state of cultural emergency that all publicity produces. All publicity produces the need for the sovereign to assert himself. So in India, and I say all over the post-colonial world, there's a foundational transaction between this unstable open edge of publicity. By open edge, I mean publicity that constantly overflows, bleeds into something else. You don't know what's going to happen. And the assertion of sovereign power, whose authority is evoked to filter authorized and unauthorized. So you have the sovereign as filter, constituting this everyday performance. What you have today is an unanticipated situation for social theories of publicity, where the old partitions of liberal social theory are completely unworkable. Nowhere is this more apparent in the post-colonial world, where mobile media has become a expressive force for poorer and lower middle-class populations. So look, in the third world, the phone is the first computational device. It is also the only camera and recording device, the storage of intimate and public memory, a powerful means of public expression, entertainment, and communication. So as networks spread on an everyday basis, connecting millions of media-enabled phones, user-driven circulation has transformed life. Once circulated, phone images are reframed by new contexts, media industries and 24-hour loops, fictographies of rumor, and political mobilization. So these are two wildly differing videos that have emerged from the mobile era. One is a clip, a Syrian mobile phone clip that Ravi Bro used for his installation, which is essentially a young boy, I think it's in Homs, who's running with his cell phone camera to track a government assassin, and it's very interesting. He zooms to the assassin, and the assassin shoots him. And the second one is a sting video. I have to play this. Yeah, it's a sting video, very important sting video that exposed corruption, also through this personalized device. The artist and film theorist Hito Steyl has analyzed the culture of quote-unquote poor images that have emerged from the confluence of pirate culture, data compression, and network mobility. The poor image, says Steyl, recalls the compromised visuality of earlier concepts of imperfect cinema, amateurish, blurred, and filled with artifacts. So the contemporary traffic in poor images is more ambivalent and affect-driven, and operates within a contested zone of commercial and common interest. So this constant zone of commodified and non-commodified interests. So you have artistic, pornographic, and paranoid material are all part of this constellation of poor images and present a combustible, almost moving snapshot of the contemporary crowd. This is what Hito Steyl says. It's neurosis, paranoia, fear, as well as its craving for intensity and fun. A very bizarre scenario with the disjunction of sovereignty. Sovereignty, the old model of sovereignty where the police can play patron and censor is rendered up in the air. It's rendered up in the air all over the world. So let's go to disjunction number 2. The public. The separation of intimate and public life was the basis of much of recent Western social theory, the foundation of much of legal doctrine and case law. The old partitions, as I said, are in disorder. One key element is personalization of experience. Personalization is integral to the economy of experience in the web since 2005, transforming the way in which information is gathered and retailed. So there are 3 elements in personalization: the search, user-generated media, and a model of surveillance that is the new normal. So carefully curated experiences are drawn from user profiles that are silently gathered by media algorithms, social media algorithms when users go online. So this all of us know this. It leads to personalized connections, search predictions. Prediction engines are big research now. Vast surveillance engine of circulation. But this model is very interesting. It is premised on the constitutive instability of online subjectivity. So it's premised on the fact that subjectivity online is unstable. As users are invited to permanently engage in machine-like activity, sharing, posting, updating their profiles, the idea was that identity is constantly changing. Each trail has to produce a stream of data to further personalize public action. So what this does is very interesting. It transforms temporality. So this move, I think, signals a transformation of internet time as imagined by social media. Circulation has taken command. Circulation now is the machine that's taken command. Within a temporality of ceaseless transit, a seeming culture of the indeterminate that resists representation. We know this. So we are caught, and I quote, in a state of animated and animating suspension that forces itself on consciousness. This is Laurent Berlant, unquote. So the clarity of life, clarity of closure is impossible. Life is a series of updates, number of friends and likes, and the constant stream of information, of travel, of political opinion, individual popularity. Search engines, rank pages, individual stardom, and political spectacle. So this is led to this notion of the calculative public. You're obsessed with how many likes you have, how many people have seen your page, how quickly you come up in the search engine, right? This obsessive calculation of subjectivity. So in this public culture of temporality, writes Carlo Cadov, the present is perceived as a series of disruptive events. The spectacular and the catastrophic, rather than the structural and the chronic, have become the characteristic marks of the present. So in this culture of temporality, which is ceaseless, the event is transformed and exhibited as a series of short spurts. So what you have is this temporary capture of a fast-moving temporality. It's a capture of time, because time is constantly moving. You want to capture time. The political demonstration, the political spectacle, the media scandal, the 24-hour news loop, the viral spurt, and at the back, you have social media algorithms happy at every expansion of the space. Now, one of the great challenges, and I find this all over the world, but in India it's particularly interesting, has been for the old model of liberal social theory based on stranger sociality. So the old imaginary public sphere, designating the community of strangers, is now in turmoil. So you have, I think I've got them. Yeah. So the old imaginary public sphere, designating the community of strangers, is now in turmoil. So digital infrastructures mobilize the fiction of stranger revelry online, while simultaneously facilitating and encouraging and the coupling of online environments. Ever more dimensions of private life that seem to demand presentation and validation within public media. So if the concept of the public was always included a certain ambiguity between observation and participation, production and consumption, today's media environments, I think, make these inadequacies of these partitions extremely apparent. So Michael Warner says, and I quote, "An environment of strangerhood is the necessary premise for some of our most prized ways of being," unquote. So you have the explosion of our personal and social identity into public areas. It renders the stranger status ever more tenuous, because what is the stranger? So denying us the obscurity needed to protect such forms of life. So the social imaginary of the post-media public envisions relations among friends, not strangers. In the world of digital communication, the discursive figure of the friend operates as a sign of intimacy and familiarity. So here, behind all this is this media machine in either your bag or your pocket, which is the phone. So the phone plays an increasing role in mobilizing new forms of attachment and privileges participation through apps and gadgets. And it becomes a participation is introduced to displace the old discursive model of the political. Right? So you have participation, which is very cool. So in this design, oppositions of privacy and publicity are increasingly sustainable as the private is drawn towards constant public presentation in social media networks. So this produces a very strange scenario where you can't flip between what is private and what is public. Who is the stranger, who is the friend? This is constantly flipping between these two worlds. So what are we faced with this politically? In a remarkable book on the post-media contemporary, Lauren Berlant describes a situation captured by what she calls an experience of cruel optimism. Cruel optimism, a situation which exists when something we desire, and Berlant says, when something we desire is actually an obstacle to our flourishing. So she says, in the precarious, affect-saturated zone that is our present, subjects, all of us, engage in practices that bind ourselves to situation of profound threat, but at the same time, they're ennobling. They give us meaning, but they are situations of profound threat. In the neoliberal present, people seek to maintain the process, the ongoingness of attachment itself. You want to keep life going. So the question is, a larger question is the transformation of collectivity in a post-media landscape. This is the elephant in the room. In some of the gloomier readings of Web 2.0 collectivity that I have read, I mean, Jody Dean is a good example. So you have the current collectivities that are measured up and seen wanting against older models of modernist stranger sociality, radical contingency, and a political try to public speech. So basically, the current is a decline. And when my program Sarai began in India, everyone started attacking us because we wanted to work on new media. No, read books the old way. So I think this is a tendency. How do we reimagine collectivity? So unsurprisingly, if you look at the discourse on this, it's a familiar catalog of negatives: a receding public in the midst of permanent publicity, a solidarity dispersed by permanent personalization, a compromised politics scarred by online events, memory archives now hostage to large transnational media corporations, the desire for attachment skillfully exploited by right-wing movements worldwide, India, Turkey, Trump's USA, notorious examples, right? I think, for me, I mean, I live in Delhi, I live in India, so what this narrative misses is most of the post-colonial world, where despite the rise of mobile phones, populations inhabit a disjunctive sensory infrastructure. You must understand this. It's a disjunctive sensory infrastructure, not this permanent model of publicity. So where permanent connectivity exists only as a chimera for techno-optimists. So the idea of connection as a set of aesthetic and political possibilities suggests but a flickering transience. Moments of intensity, there are moments of intensity and moments of breaking away. So we must understand the contingency of this presence. In 2013, a Mumbai artist collective camp followed a ship of sailors. It's one of the projects that I really like. So camp follows the ship of sailors who are basically sea proletarians who are moving. Almost all are Muslims. They are moving across the Indian Ocean, delivering commodities. You know, it's kind of a utopian animation of the past where the borders didn't exist. They just traveled and delivered goods. So what they did was they commingled with other sea proletarians from Baluchistan, Iran, and Sindh. So this project video, Gulf to Gulf to Gulf, tracked the movement of commodities, local ships, and sailors across this turbulent geography of the Indian Ocean. What is very interesting for today is this. In this art project, the sailors' mobile phone videos generate connections. That's the archive of the whole film. It's the mobile phone video. The sailors' mobile phone videos generate connections between sailing route, the death and life of ships, of work time and dream time, expressive of this kind of poetics of infrastructure, the doubling of infrastructure. I'm going to show you that. So the videos produced by the sailors in Gulf to Gulf to Gulf, they express this intermedial connection. So they're connecting, if you see this, they're connecting disparate histories, cinema, music, and emergent subjectivities of media-enabled population. So these are basically cell phone videos which they have mixed with Hindi and Arabic film songs. It's a very interesting, personalized media machine, but it's not a personalized media machine. So what they did was they used a particular Nokia phone. So it's pre-Web 2.0. It's an old Nokia phone with very powerful Bluetooth. So they were transferring media between ships. So what is interesting is the media is shared almost entirely off network through Bluetooth connections. So I think it's interesting this peer-driven network recalls the utopianism of the early internet by bypassing media industry filters. But I think it signals this sensory infrastructure. So this is the poetics of the sensory infrastructure. Here, provisional networks form around temporary connections, Bluetooth sharing of media by sailors, urban proletarians, migrants, serviced by local neighborhood shops and networks. Even outside, on the street, you can get the same thing. You just have to take your phone and they will fill media. So this is a remarkable infrastructure of agility and possibility. It is this moving in and out of infrastructures, that bypasses the possibility of inhabiting a time of permanent publicity. This is what I mean by disjunctive infrastructure. So what do disjunctive infrastructures do, to conclude? They may expand exponentially during crisis. You know, a working class person may buy a data pack, a small data pack, and attach themselves to networks. But they leak and attach to other environments, political events, other platforms. So this is a volatile mobility. It provokes, I think, questions of, for me, it raises questions of media theory, the nature of the mobile sensorium, and the techniques of navigating this treacherously addictive world. It's a strange narcotic, where you're constantly pushed to attach yourself. I mean, I don't have a Facebook account. It's strange, but everyone thinks I'm insane. So this desire for permanent participation and permanent attachment, I think there's a way in which we have to rethink what attachment means. and rework what the disjunctive infrastructure means, and rework what poetics means after the coming of personalized technology. The late media scholar Miriam Hansen, in this lovely essay before she died, she called for a political ecology of the senses. If the encounter between cinema and mass crowds resulted in so many pioneering ideas of media theory, it is entirely possible that the best work on contemporary media mobility is yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravi. That was a wonderful speech. Thanks a lot. Il y aura traduction simultanée si on peut poser des questions en français aussi, mais en anglais. Okay, so to get things going, a question. Perhaps I could ask you a question, Ravi. You talk in this post-colonial world of media. I noticed you use a lot of words about the fecundity, if you like, of this world. You know, we use multiplication, doubling, overflowing, bleeding. And thinking about a critique of that sort of world that already existed, 20, 30 years ago. I'm thinking about people like Jameson, actually. There's one word that seemed to me to be very noticeable by its absence from your discourse, and I want to speak about that. And the word is, simulacrum or simulacra. And of course, this was a great critique of this multiplication, the doubling, the overflowing. And I'm wondering if that is because you would see that as a kind of a moral tool by the establishment, if you like, to maintain this sovereignty, to look upon, to give it a pejorative sense. There's a pejorative sense of this multiplication and doubling, that it's to be frowned upon. It's a bad thing from the point of view of sovereignty. So, is that why you avoid it? Is it a tool that is used, a tool to maintain sovereignty, to maintain the power, rather than to let it go into this multiplication and doubling and bleeding and overflowing? Just wondered if you could talk about that while you are all thinking up other questions.
Look, the way I see sovereignty, sovereignty as a problematic. Mm-hmm. I don't see it as this way or that way. Sovereignty is a problematic. Look, if the most powerful country in the world cannot prevent one soldier leaking all those videos, and Snowden, the sovereignty there's a problematic of sovereignty. Forget Trump or anyone coming into power. Sovereignty is a problem today, and we have to problematize sovereignty. There are two reasons this has happened. The design of new media privileges agglomeration and multiplication. It privileges it because it creates value. It's the exact opposite of what Canetti said about the crowd. If you remember what Canetti said in Auto da Fe and Crowds and Power. Canetti says, under capitalism, capitalism destroys our value and destroys our individuality, even though it promotes individuality. The only way power can come is if the many can become one in the crowd, right? This is what Canetti says. Many must become. Here, the one must become the many through multiplication. It's about how many hits you get. So the multiplication creates value, but it's also a problem. The problem is it is not the same everywhere. There are disjunctive infrastructures. There is inequality in the world, right? And infrastructures leak on to other infrastructures. It creates a potential where these potentialities can see new conjunctions, and that is what is interesting, I think.
And you say also it problematizes the notion of attachment and the notion of poetics.
I think we have to rethink what we mean by attachment, because attachment is a value that is now part of the commodification of experience. I think we have to revisit what attachment means, because attachment, right? People who like attachment a lot are the great right-wing mobilizations in the world very strangely using Twitter. Except Erdogan. Erdogan seems to dislike Twitter, but this constant production of affect. So we have to rethink what we mean by attachment. For me, it's another. Sovereignty is a problematic. Attachment is a serious problematic. Although I think attachment has great value. at some point. It does have value, but we must actually revisit it and rethink what we mean by attachment.
And the poetic?
Yes, I think infrastructure has a poetics. And by poetics, well, in the first citation I read out, it's constant overturning and doubling of infrastructure. If you read Western discourse on Africa, it's a narco-politics. It's this decrepit state, corrupt regimes, violence everywhere. Actually, what they say is, a lot of interesting things come out of this. Every time I visit Africa, I learn something new. Incredible story. So I think we have to open this up now in interesting ways. And I think part of the South is also, that's why I'm very happy I'm speaking here. It has particular meaning to me because I can connect with what's happening in the street. It's very difficult to explain because I feel I'm home, because you go out, you recognize the phone shops, the VCD shops. I speak in Tamil. It's it's difficult feeling. It's not a...
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Ravi. Anybody got any questions out there? On a un micro, hein? Yes.
Merci beaucoup. C'était une conférence extrêmement intéressante. Alors en fait, j'ai deux questions, mais elles sont liées l'une à l'autre. La première question, c'est de savoir si ça vaut vraiment le coup de conserver le concept d'infrastructure. Parce qu'en fait, vous avez montré un petit peu la dilution, en réalité, si on reste classique, la dilution de l'infrastructure dans la superstructure. Enfin, il y a un flou. Donc j'aimerais que vous reveniez là-dessus, parce que moi, je ne suis pas du tout une spécialiste des médias, ni de ce type de questions, véritablement. Et la deuxième chose, c'est que je me posais la question de savoir comment vous envisagez véritablement des spécificités, parce que je comprends que, même si on peut en discuter, mais je ne veux pas être longue, donc ça sera pour une autre fois, le post-postcolonial. Mais je me dis, est-ce que dans ce que vous dites, il y a quelque chose que vous avez pu observer, par exemple, dans certaines régions du monde, de régions du monde qui ont été colonisées par le passé de façon analogue ou similaire, d'autres avec des différences, parce qu'en réalité, ce qui m'intéresse le plus, si vous voulez, moi, dans les questions dites postcoloniales ou décoloniales, ce sont les aspérités et les reliefs. Ce n'est pas le lissage du monde, vous comprenez, sous l'étiquette postcoloniale.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna take the second question first because it's an important question. I think the part of the problem I think of post-coloniality is we can't give it a name anymore. The third world was never really good. The South is also not very good because this kind of violence of abstraction. So I don't know what to call it. That's why I said post-colonial, and I won't talk about it. I can't geographically describe it. It's conceptually incorrect to geographically describe it. But I think there are so I can ask this question by going to the first. Because infrastructure is something I can address. So infrastructure has a certain texture, I think, and anthropologists and artists have worked a lot on this in different ways. And the important thing is, I think, to recast it in the value of site specificity. I always prefer articulating what does the site of infrastructure tell you? What does this potentiality have? What do these conjunctions tell you? And that, I think, especially insofar as media infrastructure, where you have big capital, the largest companies of the world are now media companies, Google, Facebook, et cetera, including India. So I think we have to open up site, the notion of the site and the field when we talk about infrastructure. And look at the kind of potentialities and the power that infrastructure has. So I can't say anything beyond. I'll give you one example. So one of the things that's really interesting in the South is the way they sell data. So in most parts of the North, people are on data plans, right? They're on data plans. So no, I'm not on a data plan. Most working class people in India buy 2 euro cent data pack 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day, so you move in and out of different times. And that's what I think is interesting, including Africa. People buy small data packs. So I think this disjunction is something I would investigate as a field, and that it's important to investigate. So we shouldn't, even in our counter narrative, we shouldn't flatten it. So, thanks.
Thank you very much. Is it on? Yeah. Thank you very much for an extraordinarily stimulating talk. I wanted to ask you or push you a little bit on there was something that was somewhat incommensurable about the way we think about theory in the past, say the public sphere, and what you were describing in the present, where the theory in the past was always something that was flattening or generalizable, that didn't speak to the specificity of any one experience, right? So in a way, one could, if one wants to dilate a little bit what you were saying there, one could say, well, there still are publics that are based on strangerhood. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, one could argue that the web makes strangerhood more prominent, not less, right? And anonymity more important in certain circumstances, not less. But what seems to be different is the number of publics, that there's no longer the public sphere per se, but more, for lack of a better term, what Lauren Berlant calls boutique publics, sort of siloed publics, if you will, but that there's still strangerhood in some of them. And without strangerhood, it wouldn't, for Warner, even be a public. So my question, I guess, for you is, to what extent do you think the problem is with the concept itself of publics or public? And to what extent do you think it's about the minute that one goes to the specific, then one has to think about the relationship between the abstract concept and the specific in a different way, and that the contemporary period requires us not simply to think about friendship versus strangerhood, but the proliferation, as you were talking about before, of publics that prevent a kind of general public, if it ever existed, to exist in quite the same way today.
Okay, this is a long conversation I have even in Delhi. So I'll put it this way. I think as far as new media is concerned, because I work on new media, it works on a particular design of publicity. It's a particular engine of publicity which transforms the earlier model of putting value to experience. So, so there's this flipping, which is what I've talked about. One is between privacy, anonymity, security. It's a big part of new media discourse, that we're offering you security, we are offering you privacy, we're protecting you, right? On the other hand, this notion that you have to permanently attach yourself and conduct different forms of public speech that are personalized. And personalization produces your publicity. I mean, it's a fairly solid business model of producing value. Every minute, that's how the engine works. Now, the problem that produces, I mean, one is you can ask this question: is this are these this older social theory of the public routinely valuable all across the world? Does it work in the same way all across the world? How do we ask questions? So that's one separate set of questions, right? We can always ask those questions, and people have asked those questions. So for me, what is interesting is what I've been looking at is a lot of case law now in my so basically you have courts who have huge problems deciding. When people express themselves publicly, you have to prosecute someone. The servers are in California, the case is in India. The data is owned by some company that's never going to give you access to the data. It's a personal account. So this flipping between stranger and public, I think, is opening fissures at every level. I'm sure the same problem is happening in France. It's happening at every level, because the older model of the stranger speech, the politics, contingency, is now being fissured at an everyday level. For example, my organization, we used a personal Facebook account for 5 years until we discovered it. So this flipping of these zones is opening up all kinds of questions. So what I want to ask is, one, where are we going from here? What is this form of publicity? Two, which is not just me, is the older partition of public and private, something we can hold on to. And if we want to hold on to, what does it mean today? When you have a media engine that is based on overturning these words, that you speak through your personalized machine, which is either your Facebook account or your Twitter account, right? So this is a real interesting problem for me. But it's also a problem in courts. It's a huge problem every day in courts. So I'm writing this thing on, I'm writing this thing on violence, which is, I've been looking at a number of cases and number of incidents, and most of them use this app called WhatsApp. I don't know if some of you use WhatsApp. Yeah. So WhatsApp is used mostly in the South, including all the migrants who are trying to come to Europe use WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is very popular to the South because it's free. It's a free call. It's free chat, but all the cases of violence, it's a personal delivery machine. It doesn't go on the web. So the public-private thing, forget it, it's a private network. You can't search a WhatsApp thing on the web. It's off the web. So the police have no idea why it's happening. The courts have absolutely no clue. It's a very interesting zone. Is it private? Is it public? Is it public? Is it private? So this is the site that I think researchers and artists have to enter to open up questions about this zone that we are entering. And all the violent incidents in India, at least, have been linked to WhatsApp circulation.
On pourrait discuter toute la nuit, mais dernière question maintenant, malheureusement, mais...
Thank you for... Oh.
Marche?
Yeah. Does it work? Okay. First, I wanted to thank you for the very interesting talk. You have covered so many things, so there are a few things that I have not caught, unfortunately. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that. But also, I wanted to ask you if, for you, the post-colonial is what you also call the post-media. That is the first question, because you seem to have used these interchangeably.
Yeah.
And some. The other question is, you have quoted an author speaking of this notion of cruel optimism. I'm sorry, I did not catch the name of the author.
Lauren Berlant.
Berlant. Okay. Could you please elaborate on that? I'm not sure. This creation of desire that is caused apparently by the new sensory infrastructure. And then the last question is... No, that's it. Thanks.
So Berlant asked the question, which I think all of us are asking at some level, is what are the challenges posed by an affective intensive culture, which is highly affective intensive and affect saturated, and particularly in our media saturated culture, and what is this transaction that we are something that we are really attached to, is which is your phone, your dream for instantiation is also an extremely dangerous site, and there are 2-3 expansions of that I did. One is this model of participation. You participate essentially through your app increasingly. One is, and this is something Christopher Kelty, the anthropologist Christopher Kelty, has worked on, where the model of participation is increasingly held out as a substitute for political participation, right? So this is one of the I think dangerous zones that she opens up. She's really opening up a question. As far as the second one is concerned, which is actually the trickiest one.
If you don't mind, I just did not get the part, what is the optimistic part about it?
Cruel, of course. Cruel optimism is a situation where a situation of intense pleasure can be a situation of intense danger. And you're constantly desiring a future. You're constantly desiring a future that is equally, disruptive to your well-being. And this is the paradox of the present. You desire and yearn for a future that is deeply disruptive to your well-being. And this is I think a very problematic situation that all of us are faced. And the question that all of us are asked: do you attach yourself or not? Do you and what are the terms in which you attach yourself?
I mean, this brings us back to the notion of desire as suffering, which is a very classical topic in philosophy in general, right?
Yeah. But I think new media transform the value of attachment and experience, because they constantly demand of us. It's an invitation to participate. And that, I think, opens up all kinds of... It's not just about love and desire. It's about pain and loss and violence. It's a lot of violence. I'll give you an example. In 2005, this working class kid in Delhi showed me a video of the Saddam Hussein execution. And it really disturbed me. It completely disturbed me. And I said, what are you doing with this? And he said, this is very popular everywhere. And that's when I realized there's something going on in this. It's this deep narcotic, I think, that we have to understand. This is something we keep with us all the time. It's a 24-hour machine. And I think she caught something there. And this is something I've been really working on and thinking about. What are we getting into here? It's something that we can't do without. But it opens up so many questions. As far as the post-postcolonial, I don't think it's a description. It's something that I wanted to open up. As far as the post-media is concerned, it really refers to a situation where increasingly media is now like a collective singular. It seems to designate all parts of our experience. So in the past, there was something called media, which is away from us, which is the TV station, the newspaper, the radio, which is governed by law and censorship, in India at least. Today, those divisions, we are all media in a sense. And this is the new capitalist machine, where the production of value every second of our life is held out. But it also produces fantastic collaborations, events like this, demonstrations. And I think so we have to work on this collective singular. That's what I mean.
Thanks very much, Ravi. I think on that note, we're all media. What a powerful presentation from a powerful speaker who is very much at the heart of things. And what was so good about that, about this whole conversation was that, and that your speech led us to, was that it joins in so many ways profoundly to other things. Like yesterday, the notion that this is a crisis. There's a crisis here about something. And that adds to that really in a powerful way. But we're going to have to leave it there. And so I'd just like everyone to thank Ravi Sundaram. Thank you very much. That was great, Ravi. Really wonderful.